6:45 on Monday, December 20th, 2021. And I would look for a motion to go into closed session.
I'll make that.
Bruce? Yes. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Kate?
Got it, yep.
Roll call?
Green,
Yes.
Howery,
Yes.
Halverson,
Yes.
Fisher,
Yes.
Ribino, yes.
Okay, we will move across the hallway and convene in a closed session.
And I'll be ending the webinar now. We'll open back up when we're back into open session.
Christine, you want to do it?
Sure, I make a motion to approve the proposal as discussed in closed session.
We have a second?
I'll second.
Kate? Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried 5-0. Okay, moving on. We've got consent agenda items, minutes of the December 6th, 2021 school board meeting. Request approval of general fund vouchers 176763 through 176946 and 291449 through 291490, and purchasing card transactions dated 10/21/21 through 11/20/21. Let's see. I would request a motion for approval of the minutes, general fund vouchers and purchasing card transactions, professional staffing recommendations, and co-curricular staffing recommendations.
I so move it.
Arlen, I have a second.
I'll second that.
Bruce, discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. We have some personnel items unnecessary for vote, and we will move into public comments, of which we have a few to be read. And Angie, how do you want to do this?
Sure. At this time, I'd like to invite any members of the public. If you would like to make a public appearance by speaking to the board, please utilize the Q&A portion found at the bottom of your Zoom window. In the Q&A, we ask that you type your name, address, subject of interest, and whether you have discussed this item prior to the meeting with either a district administrator or President Howery. After submitting the information, I would transfer you over to speak to the board. And if you'd like to read the written comments while we're having people
Okay,
register.
we'll go around the room. Kate, would you like to start?
Sure. The first public comment is from Melissa Carr, 4614 Bellingrath Street. On November 22nd, a community letter in support of universal masking for McFarland K-12 with the signatures of 330 parents, caregivers, and community members was submitted to the district and school board. This letter specifically stated support for a layered approach to COVID mitigation and cited the multifaceted plans for K-12 schools outlined by many local and national health agencies. A special school board meeting was called, and with no notice or community input, quarantines were suddenly ended for close contacts at school. Parents and families were blindsided by the last-minute decision to remove a COVID protocol after strong community support for keeping COVID protocols. This option was not discussed in advance, and no one in the community was given a chance for input prior to the meeting. In addition, while many public health professionals would support the ending of quarantines for close contacts in schools, they do so only with the inclusion of a routine COVID testing program, often referred to as test to stay. If kids continue to test negative for COVID, then they should be allowed to remain in school. Since earlier this year, routine testing has been listed by all major public health agencies as one of the most important mitigation efforts for school. Parents such as myself have been asking for routine testing since the summer. The state of Wisconsin offered a free routine COVID testing program for schools prior to the start of the school year. The district was aware of this free program mid-summer, perhaps earlier, and neglected to enroll. 75% of school districts in Wisconsin are part of this program. Why isn't McFarland? There are many expert resources at the district's disposal, from PHMDC to UW Health Pediatrics to other agencies. Asking for advice from one or two individuals who already supported the district's plans is not an honest or prudent approach. If quarantines are keeping too many kids out of school, then a problem-solving approach should be used in a partnership with public health agencies. Figure out ways to reduce the number of cases in our school and community at the outset, such as fixing the crowded K-5 lunchtime, changing the format of or reducing extracurriculars, and being strict about mask usage at school-sponsored events. That is currently not happening. And as mentioned, enact a test-to-stay program or be open to other solutions from public health. With the highly transmissible Omicron variant already rampant throughout much of the United States, and experts warning of an explosion of cases in the next month, now is the time to review holes in COVID mitigation plans and make changes. For the original variant and the Delta variant, the 15 minutes of exposure and 6 feet of spacing were merely decent science-based suggestions for a society to continue to function while reducing risk. They were never magic walls past which COVID cannot be transmitted. With the higher transmissibility of Omicron variant, these numbers will be almost meaningless, and any holes in McFarland's COVID mitigation strategy will become even more obvious and dangerous. Please listen to the community support for strong COVID protocols in our schools and consult with expert agencies to make improvements. The second one is from Amy Lawrence, 5219 North Autumn Lane. Given the recent rise in cases and the arrival of the highly transmissible Omicron variant, I am urging the school board to reconsider the quarantine policy for unvaccinated close contacts. As a parent and former staff member, I understand the importance of keeping students learning in the classroom as much as possible. But our current policy goes against guidance from medical and public health experts at the CDC, DHS, PHMDC, and AAP. We recently had an entire 5th grade class switch to virtual learning, and the district dashboard said that during the week of December 13th, there was evidence of potential transmission in school. The transmission can also spread to students, families, and the greater community. With the current strain on our healthcare resources throughout the state, we should be doing what we can to avoid additional burden. Many more students will be fully vaccinated when we return from winter break and therefore eligible to avoid asymptomatic quarantine. The school could employ the test to stay strategy recently approved by the CDC, which would strike a better balance between keeping students in school and helping to prevent outbreaks. The Wisconsin DHS offers a free federally funded testing program for K-12 schools that 75% of the districts are enrolled in. School-based testing reduces spread, ensures convenient and equitable access, and helps provide a safer learning environment. McFarland schools should use these resources to expand testing in the schools and employ a test-to-stay policy.
Bruce?
My first letter is from Mindy Marty, 5303 Black Walnut Drive. She writes, I am writing to emphasize the importance of the mask mandate at the McFarland schools. I have noticed that athletes are not wearing their masks during events, and the fans are not wearing the masks in the stands. I also received an email from the 6th grade teacher stating that on Wednesday, December 22nd, there was a snack and a movie, and that they need volunteers to donate single serving bags of pretzels. As a result of the snack, the students will take their masks off in the classroom. This is not following COVID protocols and keeping our kids safe. As of December 19th, 2021, COVID cases in Dane County, Wisconsin have increased recently and are extremely high. The numbers of hospitalized COVID patients and the deaths in the Dane County area have also risen. So far, December has been the month with the highest average cases since November 2020 in Dane County. I stress the importance of wearing masks at the McFarland schools and following other COVID protocols now during a time when COVID cases are on the rise. And the next letter is from Heather Guy, 10 Billinggrath Court. She writes, I am writing to share my disappointment and displeasure in the change to the quarantine requirements in the McFarland School District. My son was diagnosed with COVID on November 15th, 2021. A child in his class had a positive COVID test on November 11th, 2021, and last attended on the 8th of November, 2021. My child was not considered a close contact, but we cannot find any other place where he could have contacted COVID, and he says he was near the child at lunch when they were both unmasked. If my child had been considered a close contact, I would have been happy to have him quarantined at home. I was stunned when I saw the Capital Times article, which included a letter the director of the PHMDC wrote to the schools in Dane County. The letter stated, to be clear, schools cannot redefine quarantine or close contact or declare that they are ending quarantine for individuals. These are public health terms that have implications beyond the school setting. Schools cannot say to someone who knows that they were exposed to COVID-19 that they do not need to quarantine. They do. Did the school board members receive a copy of this letter? If not, why didn't the administration share this letter with the school board members? If the school board members did receive the letter, why was this recommendation ignored? I am truly alarmed that when adjusted for the student population, McFarland has the second highest case rate in Dane County already, and changing the quarantine requirements is doomed to make that rate increase even further. The letter sent from this administration to district parents claims that only 6% of the 441 quarantined students ended up testing positive. I'm concerned you don't understand how important it is that 26 students were kept out of the schools and therefore unable to spread COVID to others in the school. Respectfully, I am pleading with the school board to reconsider this change. Our students and community deserve your respect and concern for their health. Sincerely, Heather Guy. Christine?
Okay. The first public comment is from Amy Babula of Main Street. And she writes, members of the school board and administration, we are asking that you please follow all the COVID protocols recommended by the CDC, the AAP, Wisconsin DHS, and PHMDC in our schools. These protocols are designed as a layered approach to COVID mitigation and have been scientifically proven to be the most effective way to reduce spread of COVID in schools and keep students safe and in person. It is the job of our public health officials to keep our children and our communities safe and healthy, so please follow their guidelines and use their professional training to guide your decision-making for our district. Their recommendations include universal masking, quarantine after exposure, and now the test-to-stay testing programs, where students who are close contacts are tested multiple times during what would be their quarantine period and allowed to stay in class if they test negative. The new test-to-stay program would be a much safer way to handle quarantines rather than dropping them entirely. After removing the need for close contacts to quarantine on November 29th, it only took 11 days to send one class to virtual instruction and another 7 days for the district to state on their dashboard that they are seeing transmission in the schools. Clearly, the let's try it and see what happens approach is showing that eliminating quarantine altogether is driving up transmission and putting everyone at risk. Wisconsin offers free testing to schools, which 75% of districts are already using. Please take advantage of this testing and use it to ensure that positive cases are quarantined and negative cases are allowed to safely return to the classroom. It is your job to use the professional resources and recommendations from our public health agencies to keep our children and our families safe. Please follow the guidelines from PHMDC, DHS, AAP, and the CDC. They also want children to be in school as much as possible, and they have made their recommendations with that goal in mind. The data from the new Omicron variant is showing that we will be seeing many more cases in the coming months. Now is the time to follow the science and make our schools as safe as possible. Thank you for all of your hard work for our school district during these very challenging times. Your service to our community is greatly appreciated. Amy Babula and Clyde Drake. Okay. The second public comment that I am reading comes from Samantha Zelinga off of Rankin Road. Good evening. Last Friday, the CDC endorsed the Test-to-Stay program. This program helps schools avoid quarantine safely. After a student is identified as a close contact, the student is tested multiple times for a week. That student is allowed to stay in school as long as there are no symptoms and negative tests. Since McFarland is adamant on ending quarantines, this program seems like a good compromise. However, this would mean that students with no symptoms would be tested as well on a schedule. The case studies for tests to stay out of California and Illinois showed results that kept the spread down to about what quarantines did. California tested twice the week exposure, and Illinois tested on day 1, 3, 5, and 7. McFarland should implement a test-to-stay program and enroll in the free state testing program that 75% of other Wisconsin districts have. This will keep children in school while following the science. I understand that a lot of us are tired. The situation changes daily. We know more than we did 2 years ago, but we're still learning. This is science happening right before our eyes. We have seen spread in our school. We just recently moved a 5th grade class to virtual. We have more options to prevent spread than what we are implementing. We must implement those other options like test to stay. Schools are leaders in the community. Parents, students, and community members look to their schools for a sense of safety and a source of true information. Following the science as it changes will not only help save lives, but will teach the community about science and how vital it is we follow it. Omicron is here. Cases are rising in Dane County and around the country. Milwaukee already has a significant number of Omicron cases. It has been said once Omicron enters a community, their case number line looks almost vertical. Cases double about every 2 to 3 days. Like with other variants, we are learning more about Omicron by the day. Initial reports said that Omicron was less severe. Studies out of the UK show this is no longer the case. Hospitalizations come after positive tests, and deaths come after hospitalizations. Holding on to initial reports as fact is dangerous. Our district must act as the leader it is supposed to be and provide a good example for the community while simultaneously keeping the community safe. Thank you. Samantha Zelinga.
Arlen?
I have two from Tom Mooney, 6205 Pleasant Run. And the subject is superintendent search process. After watching the school board meeting of December 6, 2021 via YouTube, particularly the discussion that took place regarding the superintendent search, including committee composition of the 3 committees and the suggested process in selecting candidates to be interviewed, I'd like to offer a suggestion. My suggestion to the board is to implement a blind selection process to identify and select the initial slate of candidates to be interviewed. Implementing a blind selection process will minimize, if not eliminate, potential professional and personal biases. An individual's biases oftentimes may influence and impact decisions made, either consciously or unconsciously. If the board is serious in selecting the best candidate for the position of the superintendent, it's not vital for members of each of the committees to know the candidate's age, gender, or race. Members of the school board, along with the committee members, can easily implement a blind study process to provide input into the selection. The selection of candidates can be accomplished by reading and understanding each candidate solely on the professional merits of each candidate. A blind study process can better assure more quantitative and unbiased selection process when identifying candidates to be invited for an interview. This is a unique opportunity for the school board to take the lead in assuring a more effective process in selecting candidates to be interviewed. I realize there may be artificial obstacles and unsubstantial rationale for not implementing a blind selection process, but as a retired educator from McFarland School District and an engaged member of our community, I urge the school board to seriously consider what is being suggested. I am more interested in knowing how a blind selection process can be implemented versus why a blind study process cannot be considered. You've heard me say this before, and I'll say it again. Where there's a will, there's a way. Okay, the second one's from Tom again, and this one is about staff appreciation. As 5 school administrators who have retired from McFarland School District over the past few years, we feel called to share our deep appreciation and sincere respect for everything McFarland School District staff have done and continue to do in support of kids and families in the district. School colleagues, the many challenges you are experiencing and meeting with, such professionalism and caring were unimaginable just 2 years ago. Your dogged commitment and steadfast dedication to your profession to help kids succeed academically and emotionally are second to none. We admire you and are grateful for everything you do. From Tom Mooney, retired elementary campus principal; Sue Murphy, retired Wabisa Intermediate School principal; Roberta Faulkner, retired IMMS principal and director of instruction; Jim Hickey, retired McFarland High School principal; and Scott Brown, retired district administrator.
Thank you, Arlen. And I will read the final written public comment. It is from Connie and Brady Showalter, 5017 Card Avenue. Dear McFarland School Board members and Superintendent Anderson, I am writing today to express my support for the Test to Stay program. Given the increase in COVID positive numbers in Dane County and the district's interest in keeping students in in-person school, it really is the best option. The CDC endorses this program. As the CDC website states, Test to Stay combines contact tracing and serial testing that is repeated at least twice during a 7-day period post-exposure, to allow asymptomatic school-associated close contacts who are not fully vaccinated and do not test positive for SARS-CoV-2 to continue in-person learning. Students who participate in Test to Stay should consistently and correctly wear masks while in school and should stay home and isolate if they develop symptoms or test positive. In addition, it is extremely important to keep all mitigation strategies, masking, testing, vaccinations, hand hygiene, ventilation, distancing, which is not happening in all McFarland schools, etc., in place, especially now that the Omicron variant is present in our area. Given all of the mixing of family and friends that will happen over the holidays, please take some time during this break to prepare for the Test to Stay program. The Department of Health Services has offered a free testing program since the beginning of the year. It is time to take advantage of the free of charge and convenient COVID-19 testing program in which testing, supplies, diagnostics, and swabbing services are provided free of cost. As I have stated in previous letters to the board on this topic, we need to think about the families of the educators in our schools. The teachers and other district workers who come into contact with multiple students every day go home to children under age 5. Immunocompromised family and friends, grandparents, etc. Let's think about the bigger community and do all that we can to protect everyone. Sincerely, Connie and Brady Showalter. Okay, thank you very much, one and all, for your comments. Do we have anything else, Angie?
We have not had anyone register to speak.
Okay, in that case, we will move on to the district administrator's report.
Doing a little pinch hitting here this evening, but happy to move forward. So 7A, we have the school safety written drill evaluation notification and review per Wisconsin State Statute 11807-4 CP. That's rather routine as normal. 7B, it's resolutions for the WASB Delegate Assembly for those that will be being our delegates or delegate in January. Just as a note, the Policies and Resolutions Committee received 5 resolution proposals from the member school boards by the September 15th, 2021 deadline as recommended for the 2022 Delegate Assembly. The committee deliberated at length, deciding to recommend 6 resolutions, even though they only had 5, so they had some holdovers, of which those will be taken up on in January at the Delegate Assembly. So attached is all of the information. If you have further questions about any of those, please see Wayne or myself, and we can get you clarification either from WASB or some of our own interpretations.
I also have hard copies of it, so.
Okay, I'd like to see it.
Yeah.
Do they make the recommendation to then the WASB, or does that ultimately go to the state legislature?
So the WASB then takes that and guides their work as they educate the legislators.
Yeah.
There's 1,000 or so folks in the room, and every one of the resolutions is read and discussed and then voted on.
Yeah, I was reading through them.
Yeah.
So if we have any, I mean, I read through them and I don't know, I generally felt fine about them. No, that's not always been the case in the past, so it's going to be up to you, Bruce, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Oh, and Craig, okay.
Mhm.
So if we have thoughts about it, do we need to put it on as an agenda item if we're gonna, or how does that process work?
Typically, it's more along the lines of learning about what the items are,
Okay.
so. And we are not, our next tentatively scheduled meeting would actually occur the week of
Right.
that convention, so.
The Monday before. And all the information given was what was to be expected in a complete fashion. So my just thanks to you, Jeff, for the great job you do.
It's a
It
team
makes our
effort,
job
and
easier.
real hats off to Carrie Roberts, our accountant in our district, that, you know, she wears an HR hat, but she's, her backbone and her real part of her job is accounting. So we're very
Well,
fortunate.
regardless of who deserves the credit, I want to give it to you for sure.
Well,
Thanks for the
we
great
appreciate
job.
it.
Well, I do, just quick clarifying. So I remember reading in the past the managers, which is really fascinating because it kind of tells you what to do to address things.
Mhm.
Was there anything that was out, like a big red flag for you or anything outstanding that you thought, oh, we're going to have to change that?
Yeah, we need our legislature to fund schools.
We need more money.
That's what the accounting management says?
Well, the management discussion and analysis
Yeah.
is done by me.
Yeah.
I write that.
Oh, I see.
So,
Gotcha. Okay.
yeah.
All right. All
So
right. So that's
I might have just
your red
ad lib
flag.
to any legislators that might be listening that
Gotcha.
zero increases for this year and next year don't necessarily. I'm almost jumping into my next report.
Yes,
I
you are. You
Please
are.
do. Please do.
mean, if I'm gonna be rated tonight, it might not, you know. A lot of commentary these days about how schools are funded.
Mhm.
So, but yes, that is my favorite report to sort of put together.
Yeah.
It's starting to look pretty routine from
Mhm.
previous years because it is very technical still, and
Mhm.
by the time we get to it, we don't spend a lot of time rehashing over it. But,
Mhm.
but the biggest concern, yes, is funding.
Mhm.
When the bond, when the financial markets look at our schools and the state of Wisconsin, they compare our state to other states. Just 20 years ago, the state of Wisconsin was funding in the top 8 to 10 states. We're hitting the middle 30s of funding
Really?
per student.
Yep.
So regardless of how that translates to how our students are doing, how our staff are doing, how our communities are doing, at some point, this starts to impact us when we go to borrow money. So I can drill down to something that's more concrete. When funding education is not a priority in the state, it can come back and haunt you on other ends like building projects, short-term borrowing, stuff like that. Because as less funding is there and less commitment from state legislators, you're rated on that. So your interest rate might be higher than a neighboring state school district that might be of similar. So
Mhm.
it is very important as well. So appreciate the question. I might have went off on it a little bit. So, the 21-22 budget update. Again, I'm probably gonna read through this so I don't ad lib as much. And I'll stay off the legislative speak a little bit here. In the last few weeks, we have received information from DPI and the Governor's Office regarding ESSER funds and one-time per pupil funding. With regards to ESSER funds, ESSER 2 funds have increased from $186,644 to $447,423. The increased $260,000 comes from our work with regards to in-person learning calculations that were not originally eligible for per the Joint Finance Committee. However, our due diligence and reporting helped us obtain these funds. So if you recall back last year, there was a Joint Finance Committee motion that basically put counties like Dane County and a couple others into a spot where they might not have met the 50% threshold. DPI was able to manage through that. Our district, similar to a few others in Dane County, submitted data And we were able to receive additional funds. So we just learned about that. So that's great news for us. But again, these are all one-time dollars. These are not ongoing funds. In 21-22, we are using the original amount of $186,644 for the added 2 counselors and the expenditures related to Canvas, Zoom, and DocuSign. The additional $260,599 in ESSER 2 funds will be used to help offset the ongoing expenses of those 2 counselors and the expenditures related to Canvas, Zoom, and DocuSign in next fiscal year, 22-23. Our legislature, again, trying to steer away from the politics side, but they said, this is how you're going to manage your budgets moving forward. You're going to use one-time money to balance your budgets. So, we will do so. But as you know, one-time money at some point is no longer one-time money. It's gone.
Can you clarify, the counselors are the staff, people who are connecting with the kids who
Yes.
are homeschooled, right?
Yep. And also,
Or online, I forget.
they're staff that are in our buildings, but they are specific also to helping those that are at home.
Correct, so these aren't mental health counselors that we recently.
These are guidance counselors.
Thank
I guess, good point.
Thank
Appreciate
you. I
it.
just wanted to make sure that we're, yeah,
Yep.
who we were talking about.
That is, yeah, I didn't put in there.
That's okay.
Guidance. So that's excellent.
Yeah.
Good point. So we'll continue to use ESSER 2 funds to help with those ongoing expenses. On December 6th, 2021, we learned the federal government approved the state of Wisconsin's ESSER 3 application. The $419,176 comes with more restrictions for use, and we'll have to evaluate over the next several months how we'll be able to use the money in the upcoming fiscal years and how many fiscal years we can use it, depending on the ability to carry over funds. In summary, we would plan to use about $230,000 of this grant for the same costs that we're doing with ESSER 2 as we continue programming in 2023 and 2024. The remaining ESSER 3 funds of $190,121 will likely have some restrictions. Again, we're just learning of the details. We have to put forth a plan. We actually have to bring forward to our board meeting within 90 days of when this was approved, so within 90 days of December 6th, we will have to have an open conversation and then finalize those grant dollars. Many of the dollars are usable for the things we've been doing because we decided that we kind of knew that there were going to be some restrictions, so we were making sure things like our ESSER 2 were already in line with some of the proposals that were coming forward for how you could use ESSER 3 dollars. So we've been pre-planning, but we still have to go through a process. For future planning purposes, 24-25, we'll have no anticipated grant funding for the $230,000 of ongoing expenses that have been funded by ESSER 1, 2, and 3. So again, I've been referring to sometimes lately fiscal cliffs. We have some fiscal cliffs that we'll be planning to maintain, whether it's through taxpayer intervention, those are also known as referendums, and or other grants, and or maybe by then legislative action that starts to give per pupil increases with inflationary adjustments, which has not occurred. Again, if any legislators are out there listening, that's my stump speech. Finally, in December of 2021, the governor finally announced that the school districts in 21-22 would get one-time payments of $136 per student FTE, full-time equivalency. This amounts to $307,000 for the McFarland School District. Similar to our other school districts in our county and across our state, we would plan to designate this $307,000 to be used in fiscal year 22-23 to help balance that fiscal year. The board has an action item later, item 10C, to move that $307,000 to designated fund balance so that we can begin to help manage and balance next year's fiscal year. While the governor announced this vague plan in 2021, it came with no details of how the money would be provided to the districts until December. Again, how did we balance this budget? Because this would have been a piece of it. We were using some of our WEVA revenues that exceed our expenditures. So again, we're a fortunate school district that we have some other opportunities that will help balance budgets moving forward. So, what I'm telling you here today. So that's kind of the 21-22 budget update, but I kind of have to sort of spider into 22-23 because I think what's good for our public and for all of us as reference. Each 1% increase in our expenses is about $300,000. So I just made the recommendation, you have an action item later, to put forward one-time money for next fiscal year that will help balance out our increased expenditures. Because we have no increased expenditures. We have health insurance commitments with fiscal year 22-23 commitments and 23-24. That's one of our largest expenses. We also have a 2-year plan with our professional staff that was very progressive and unheard of across the state, that we made commitments for 2 years. That commitment is sliding in around that inflationary 12-year look back on inflation that we're going to have, which is about 4.5%. So again, when you think about our largest costs of our budget, almost 83% of our costs are for staffing, wages and benefits. We're going to be looking in the 4%, 5% when you average everything together. 1% increase in our budget is $300,000. So again, we're moving forward. We will bring forward the best budget we can as we go through this. As you know, we're just starting this budget, but we already know some hurdles. So it's important for our public to know that, again, we will be building budgets based on one-time monies, with knowledge that we have great agreements moving forward to attract and retain staff, and we have good opportunities with many of our partners, such as Dean Health Insurance, and also some of our other large expenses. Transportation. We have indexed transportation contracts that range between 2.5% and 4.5% as well, annually, based on previous 12 months of CPI. So we'll continue to work through all of those. So with that said, that's kind of my update about the 21-22 budget. Would you like me to move on to the budget calendar for 22-23?
If no one has questions, I would say. Anybody have any questions so far? Okay, hearing none, then Jeff, move right along.
I'm going to hand out on this one. Bruce is good at this. So tonight, December 20th, we'll review the calendar. I'm going to provide you a handout about enrollment, where I think things will be at, and I'll explain why I think things will be at with enrollment for 22-23 and beyond. I've kind of provided a little bit of a budget overview, and then we'll get into a little bit more of the meat of this, of the 22-23 capital projects. So with the calendar this evening, you have now a calendar in front of you. This is just a template of what I use. There's a lot more detail behind the scenes, but these are the big dates. In January, we will have open enrollment annual board action, where we will project where our enrollments are and what spaces that we may or may not have available moving forward. January, February, March, I work with A-Council to work on enrollment, staffing, program discussions. They've already received enrollment information as of about a month ago. Our 4 building principals and also some estimates on some staffing stuff, which I'll get into in a moment here. We also have principal supervisor meetings for budget development and work with the buildings as well as necessary. A key for us is February 1, 2022, professional staff retirement notifications will start. That is the deadline. Staff can submit those at any time prior, and we will continue to just have board take action on those as those come forward. Yeah, I've had great conversations with many staff members that are thinking about retiring. Sometimes I have conversations with people for 5 straight years, and then they finally or want to decide on a specific date. So we have a lot of those meetings going on. I think I've been in between support staff and professional staff, probably about 20 meetings in the last 3 weeks with staff. And many of them are just planning ahead. Some of them are really thinking about it this year, and some are weighing their options out. So,
Is that a fairly typical number?
yeah. I mean, we've really averaged probably about 5 to 6 staff members a year, and that really goes with where they are in age and number of years in education. So it's been a long time since we had a bubble crop of 10 or 12. So we might be somewhere around 5 or 7 this year. So board meetings coming up on the 7th and the 21st. I will bring multi-year projections to just show what our budget picture is for this coming year plus 5 years. Again, I make assumptions. It's a nice roadmap to kind of see where we're at when you apply enrollment to dollars. So it's easy to project revenue when you have a legislature that's not giving you much. I don't know if I happened to mention that earlier. So and then behind the scenes, we do a lot of budget development entry into the system. There are about 2,500 line codes. We do touch them all each year, even though in some cases we'll do a mass entry, but then we'll go back through and review and do some historical perspectives as well. It's something I can control in my job, so it's kind of fun. And then really we get into providing more solid estimates and solid big picture for our board and our community starting in May. And then we start getting some state equalization aid estimates in July. Now, when we hit August, we're not done with this budget because we might see a change. We might have a number of kids show up. We might have a number of kids that don't show up. That can happen. It typically doesn't. But we always want to make sure that we're willing to adjust on the fly, which we do. And then, as you know, we aren't too far removed from the past where we were reviewing equalized values, equalization aid, which then we can get into finalizing our final tax levy, which have been released, and there's been a lot of positive comments out there about where taxes went this year. You'll have an action item this evening on the recommendation to have our annual meeting on October 24th of 2022, just a short 10 months away, 11 months away. So that would be our budget calendar, and there'll be an action item on our annual meeting date coming up. Item 8D, 22-23 annual meeting. Again, the board can always set that any time between May 15th and November 1st by taking an action item. There have been times where we've set a meeting and then we've come back to the board and asked for a revision.
Right.
But at this time, our recommendation would be October 24th of 2022, and there'd be an action item on that later. Questions?
Anybody have anything? If not, thank you very much, Jeff.
I got one more.
You got another
We
one?
just got quite a bit.
Oh, yes,
But I
you
just
do.
took
I'm
a
sorry.
drink of water.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
there's no pauses.
All right.
Don't mean to interrupt.
So the 22-23 capital plan update. Annually, we discuss our capital plan. Typically, it's a little bit later in the year. However, with COVID impacts and supply chain issues, we need to act a little bit faster on some of these things these days. The capital plan is a separate fund that retains money to help with major mechanical and physical expenses that the district incurs, such as HVAC systems, roofing, and parking lot replacements. The capital plan fund is funded $249,000 annually, which is diverted from the general fund to provide a base of revenue to complete these type of activities. The fund can carry over funds if available. At times in the last 18 years, we have also relied on using one-time funding from Fund 10 reserves to pay for these types of large expenditures. Our current balance in the capital plan fund, it's also Fund 41 if you ever hear me talk about that, is $174,000. With an expenditure for the replacement chiller at Wabisa, which is totaling about $170,000, is slated to be installed April of 2022. This expenditure was not planned for about another 2 years. However, the chiller decided to have a brain of its own this year and had significant failures this fall, causing us to operate the building in a chilled mode overnight several times and using a water sprinkler system to cool the system on top of the building during hot days to keep it from overheating so we wouldn't lose AC. Hats off to Bill Faust
Holy
and Chuck
cow.
Panka for their creativity in putting sprinklers on top of the Wabisa. Not many people knew that was going on, but it was. And we were able to get through this fall. And we had kind of a warm fall.
Very, very much.
So, we're
Kudos
lucky to
to
have
Mr.
some very
Feld.
talented individuals on our staff. We are also able to jump in the supply chain order and go ahead and get our next chiller for $150,000 already ordered, is already being shipped and planned so that not only does it show up on a date in March, but also the plan is that it'll arrive direct, so it won't go to the contractor, so we can get a crane once, lift it on, and March, April is kind of the time frame when we're kind of in between that heating and cooling season, so we're going to be able to operate that building moving forward without disruption. So, so, as you can see, that's going to kind of leave us with about $4,000 left in the capital fund until the start of the 22-23 fiscal year, which starts July 1. Christine.
Where do, you mentioned Fund 41, where do Fund 10 reserve, what is Fund 10?
So Fund 10 is our general operations,
Okay.
and it has the bulk of all of the
Gotcha.
reserves for the district. There's Fund 10, 21, 39, 41, we used to have 49 when we were in construction, Fund 50, food service, Fund 80 is community recreation, and then we also have Fund 99, which is a consortium that we use for grants. So lots of fun numbers.
So if there's reserves from that overall operating budget, that's what you would use in the past, is what I've read here.
If we were
Gotcha.
ever in need of dipping into taking care of projects sooner rather than later, and then looking at
Gotcha.
that is an opportunity. Similarly, when the board was looking to make a purchase of some property near CEPS, I had come forward with, this would be an opportune time to use one-time funding for something that would benefit the district for many years to come. For 22-23, we do have the need to go after using some of the general fund dollars. We have a baseball concession bathroom storage press box area that needs to be improved. The district has already committed the water, sewer, electric, and foundation areas for that area. We started that project back in 2017. The initial hopes from the community was that fundraising efforts would be successful to help offset the nearly about $180,000 for putting what I'd call the above grade costs, which is the structure. At this time, those fundraising efforts are not producing the necessary commitments so that can be, the action item that was held by the board was waiting for those funds before they started to build. I'm asking for the board, for both the baseball and the softball, to commit reserves so that we don't lose our initial investment on the baseball side of things. Additionally, due to Title IX, and we're already 1 year behind on committing what had already started at baseball with all the infrastructure, that we need to do the same at Wabisa for softball. There will be an action item later. I'll kind of read through the rest of this document that I wrote about, but in essence, we'll be looking at needing about a projected $775,000 to move along these projects so that we can protect the investment of the district, level the playing field for all of our two sports. So like I mentioned, protect the investment the district made to a baseball field of nearly $300,000 already to have the infrastructure put in place for the concession bathroom storage areas. It is time for the district to move forward with this project independently of any fundraising options. Doesn't mean that fundraising still can't come back and help offset the expenditures. We need to start looking at a potential project related to Wisp Playground that may be 2 fiscal years away as well. There are other projects that I'll also share with you in the future that could be 5-10 years out, but just before, I'll put a little editorial asterisk. This last referendum, which we just basically completed, we started about the planning process 7-8 years ahead of what we just completed. So in 2010, 2011, we were already working on what was the project that we're kind of finishing up here. So we'll be starting to come forward with things that we need to be thinking about that are 5-10 years off. But these are more the immediate needs to get moving on. As for an action item this evening, I'd ask that 10B to be looked at and a action on dedicating about $775,000 for us to complete our formal process of bidding, construction process, which includes, we still have a process to go through with the village, with the Wabisa site, because that never went through planning commission yet. We already have the baseball that went through planning commission. We're ready, we can move on that one. We already started doing some neighborhood meetings over at Wabisa area already with some conceptual designs a couple years ago. We already received some feedback, so that'll be something we'll have to go through again. We've done this stuff before.
Has there been any additional talk? I think it just seems to me that we're around the 10-year benchmark to put lights in at Wabisa, or possibly lights in at the Holscher Road, the baseball facility.
So I would have to go back and review those agreements. I know that there was an agreement not to have lights at softball for an extended amount of period of time, and that has went by. That would still that would be a plan commission process. Our baseball facility was approved without lights because we did not move forward with asking for lights. So again, both of those projects, just like any project, could always move forward with lights at any time because you can, but it is a plan commission process.
Yep. But there's a lot of neighborhood work on the front end and you know.
And financing.
Exactly. There's a lot to make that happen.
Well, there would be a lot to do with that.
Yeah, and there was a little history of when we put our softball field over there, that there would not be, because of all the light that would carry over, which nowadays,
Different lights now.
different lights,
Yeah.
and that light is contained to this area. And I think that'll help with, and people are recognizing and seeing that.
Yep.
That'll help everyone.
But I want to reiterate here that nothing in our even probably 5 to 10 year plan is talking about lights.
Right,
Yeah,
And
Understood.
nothing that we're talking about this evening
that's
is
right.
about lights.
right.
That's right.
So I just want the
So,
community to know that. Yes, Kate?
okay, so I just am trying to understand where this money is all coming from. So, I know that we've got the capital plan fund that really doesn't have much left in it
Right.
for this upcoming year because of the chiller expense.
It will have a reboot July 1 of 249,000.
Okay,
And then we would be looking, similar to just a few times in the last 18 years, to use some of our fund balance from Fund 10. Our fund balance in Fund 10 has grown over the years, particularly because we've been, for actually the last 11 years, we've been growing. In particular, it's been growing because of our virtual school dollars that we've been receiving versus the expenditure on that side. First 5-6 years of that relationship, we were using that to manage the budget. Then there was a period of time up until 2 years ago where we weren't using any of those dollars. Instead, we were building fund balance to do two things. One, build fund balance when we have the opportunity. Two, get away from having to short-term borrow for cash management purposes. So we have built up reserves that are just about 11.5 million. Now, to stay away from cash flow borrowing, we need to stay about 10 million or higher. That's kind of where we get into the predicament where you receive property taxes 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 months after you've started your fiscal year. So again, as our residents pay, it's collected, and then there's a distribution system and calendar back to the school district. Similarly, state aid is given to the school district throughout the year, and in some cases, after the fiscal year, we get to book it as part. So that's where we get into having cash flow needs and why the district has reserves. That's one reason. Number two is when you get situations where you have one-time expenses that you need to fund. Or number three, the cash position of the district reflects when you're doing your borrowings for bonds. Will come into impact us in 23, 24 and beyond when we start to refinance bonds. So the three bonds that we took, the 6 million, 17 million, and the $41 million, three different bonds, loans we took for our 65.1 million. There's a period of time that we can't refinance, but then becomes an open market, and if we're able to save generally between 3 and 4%, that's when we go into refinancing. So having reserves helps that because we get better bond ratings and refinance bond ratings as well.
but didn't we take, maybe I'm confusing this, but because there was a vague plan last year and we weren't sure when we were gonna get funding from the governor, we borrowed money from WEVA revenue. Was that part of the fund balance?
Nope.
No, okay.
So this year's difference between our estimated revenues with WEVA and our estimated expenditures is they're balancing our expenditures over what we receive from our revenue cap.
Okay.
So this would be relying on one-time money that has already been parked in our savings account, not ongoing revenues that we're using for this budget, and we'll have to use more for next year's budget. And then thereafter, more. So it is, Kate, what I'm hearing, and I would be having the same questions about, well, wouldn't we be kind of using resources that we could also be using in other areas as well? Yes. Our goal with this would be make sure we're protecting the investment that we already started, work with those organizations to see if we can recoup, even if I need to work with them on even a 10-year plan to recoup some of the initial thoughts that those organizations had, so that we can finish off the baseball site and make sure that we're compliance with Title IX, which we kind of created that problem because we invested in, the infrastructure for the baseball. So that's why we have to take care of WMCF.
Does Title IX require
Equal
Not only-
facilities.
not only an equal number of sports, but
Facilities.
equal facilities as best you can supply?
Mhm.
Okay, all right.
Jeff, I was just gonna ask about the fundraising. Was that, do you feel like it was a good faith proposal when someone said we think we can raise 120,000? Do you feel like?
Well, originally it was 360,000 for two sites,
Yeah.
180 and 180. When they were struggling, they came back and said, well, the storage is really going to be used by the district for equipment, so shouldn't a third of that 180 be really the district? And so we worked through our budget and tried to identify, okay, maybe 60,000. So,
Well, my question being, is there a lesson that we can learn from that? I mean, I just kind of.
well, here's the unique thing I would say about McFarland, because we are very unique, but we always seem to have to fundraise for bathrooms. The stadium concession area
true.
and bathrooms.
That's true.
They completed the stadium and then said, okay, now we'll fundraise for a bathroom. The Wabisa site, we have porta potties out there.
Mhm.
And we also stuck it in an area where people really can't get to very easily.
Difficult for handicapped folks.
So,
For sure.
when the baseball project was going on, the request was, because I initially had it in the project plan, but the request was, we want 2 baseball fields instead of 1. Remember, we replaced 1 baseball
Right,
field
right.
with a new one, but they wanted 2 sites. And the group said, as they were planning through this, we can fundraise for bathrooms. So if there's a lesson learned,
Yeah.
we need to make sure that when we're gonna build a site, whatever that future site is, that we do it in its totality with some reason. Regardless of, how we'll work through the fundraising side, we'll still continue that process, working with those groups, because those groups were committed, and they're very proud groups.
Okay.
It's just, it might take more time to recoup some of those funds than just having it up front.
So
Well,
they
they're-
still are actively, in a sense. or-
I think it was kind of paused, this whole, all of these plans were made
Yeah.
pre-pandemic.
Yeah, I understand that.
And at that time, it looked like, they were very confident that they were gonna be able to do this.
Yeah.
And not even in a real long time frame. But then, life changes, and
Yeah.
boy, I
Well, I
would
think
imagine that
McFarland's always had a-
fundraising pretty much ground to a halt.
Yeah, I've always been very amazed or proud of the fact that McFarland is able to raise funds.
Yeah.
That's why it's just kind of like what happened, but I think that's the most obvious thing, Craig.
I would think.
So,
And
one more paragraph, and then,
Sure.
because I want to tie this, because you wonder about the playground. I identified that there's some
Yeah.
playground needs coming up in the future. Well, Bisa's playground is frankly undersized for the number of kids there. It's on a hill, so it's not super accessible to all students, and it's nearing its 25-year life cycle. We've recently invested, Bill Faust, Buildings Grounds Director, worked with the company to make sure our safety side of things were up to speed. We invested about $7,000 to make sure everything legally is set, make sure all of the screws are tightened, everything is up to speed. That'll carry us 1 or 2 years. been working with Parkitecture, and some of you might recognize that name because they've been working with the village over the last several years to design their bigger concept areas. Been working with them to make sure that we're incorporating, if we're making some changes with softball, where are we going in the future with playgrounds over there? Because if we need to have it a little bit more accessible, probably on the south side, where there's a lot more flat space. It's also where a lot of our principals over the years have been saying couldn't have been built on a flat surface versus a hill. But it is what it is, it's where it is. And so I've been working with Matt at the village to determine, make sure that we're not duplicating anything in the future. So that's why I've invested some of business managers' money into working with Parkitecture to take an overall look of that whole site instead of just the softball area. Because first of all, I have to have an engineer involved, because if we're gonna go to planning commission, my sketches are not nearly as good as engineer. So that is why I'm kind of foreshadowing that there's potential for some future needs for playground, but that we're trying to take an overall look at this and incorporate the whole site to see, is there any abilities to have some consolidation there with potential use of some bathroom area, just in case there's any need for community collaboration or a playground area that might be a great spot for potential use by our community, not just during the school day. So just gathering more and more information on that. So I went through a lot this evening. Usually we talk about capital plans in February, not December, and there's a lot to kind of take in there. And certainly if we're able to act on something this evening, that's wonderful. If we need to come back in January, that's fine as well. But I would be looking for an action item on item 10B later to use fund balance in 41 and 10 in an estimated amount of $775,000.
Well, will you just give me a brief description on 10C, what we're looking for there in the budget adjustments?
Yes. Discussion and possible action on 10C is to designate $307,000 of funds from the 21-22 fiscal year to the 22-23 fiscal year.
Okay, one more question.
You bet.
No.
This is a lot.
Okay, so our Fund 41 balance and Fund 10 balance, so right now we're around 11.5 million.
Yes.
We want to keep it above 10 million. If we were to take 775,000 out of there, obviously we still want to try and keep it above 10 million. Do we have any other major upcoming expenses that we should know about right now besides the park, the playground?
The only other one just came to us about a year and a half too early, the chiller.
The chiller, yeah.
Outside of that, our chillers and boilers are all with, were done through a referendum in previous projects, so we're good at the middle school, high school, with what I would say is our main HVAC systems.
All the roof stuff is done?
Our next roof project is in probably about 3 to 4 years at Wabisa. But again, we're planning that one out, would get through Fund 41. Additionally, we're also looking at our opportunities with relations to solar project at that facility. I'm in the middle of completing a grant that's going to the Office of Commission of Energy with Wisconsin has planning grants for up to $50,000. So myself and Bill are working on that. Also with our Eco Club here at the high school. They're being a little partner with us on it. So that's going into play so that we could potentially be in the cycle of larger grants that could help with energy initiatives like solar on top of a roof that could be in conjunction with when we need to recoat that roof. So another nugget of information that but as far as other projects, the other projects which I have a list that I'm going to start probably talking about, they are what I would consider more long-term and likely would need to be more referendum related. For instance, district office, if we were to have enrollment situations at the high school and as we progress, to replace district office, you're talking about probably a $3 million building in the end if you were to build it the right size. You have buildings that are not Wabisa that find the collaboration space that Wabisa has as, why didn't we get that? Because that is really effective space. So, everybody's got cafeterias now and everybody's got a gym, but Wabisa now, outside of CEPS and the middle school, they don't have that collaboration space. So, when you do something for one building, those are the type of things that are much bigger picture, would take larger dollars, would take more than just looking at capital plans. Capital plans are definitely a later item. Roofs, boilers, HVAC systems, our driveways and our parking lots that we've been really conquering over the last few years. So, but we're already thinking what's out there the next 5, 10, possibly longer. I hope that answers your question, Kate.
Yeah. And just to echo, I think what I hear Kate asking, correct me if I'm wrong, is that it's been enough time that you've been doing these with the, basically the WEVA funds, that you know how much you need for in the reserves, and you know how much.
Yes.
Yeah, because it's our collaboration's been how many years? 10.
So we go back to 2007, 2008, so it would have been the 2008 year.
So almost 14.
14 years.
Okay. So I can see the question. I agree.
Okay.
Appreciate it. That's kind of all I had.
That's it?
That's it.
I just want to say that the girls' bathroom and for a softball field over there is a long time coming. And we started out, we didn't even have porta potties there. We finally got them there. And for all the players to go through a porta potty for that long, it's, I know we've tried and looked at it, and we took care of business here, took care of business there, and always kept looking at, trying to figure out a way to do it. I am very glad that that's on there, because that needs to be done, and it's
That's long overdue.
long overdue.
Yeah.
And to put them young ladies through what that is, I think it pisses me off. I'm sorry about my language, but it's just wrong. And so I'm very glad that that's being taken care of, because that needed to be for a long, long time. Thank you.
Okay?
So that would conclude the business manager's report.
We would move along to discussion items then.
So 9A, update superintendent job posting. Yes, we have that position posted. Just as some information related, across the state, up to about 35 postings across the state for open superintendent positions. I was in a meeting last week with my statewide board that I sit on for WASBO. Exec Director John Bales from WASDA presented to us about the state of applications and where things are at. Number one is I really appreciate the fact that our board and Dr. Anderson worked early to get ours out there. Ours is one of the first out there. And we're actually in the process a lot faster than many. It's kind of due to our circumstances of having interim, but many of those districts are coming online now. So over the holiday period, just as Dr. Anderson has reported in the past, we'll see the bulk of our applicants starting to apply over the holiday break, because many of them have a little bit more time during that time. What we probably really need to do, and I'm kind of jumping to 9C, would be to establish a date to start reviewing applications, or applicants, excuse me, and at least have a special board meeting. Probably maybe the Thursday, Angie's signaling, do you think maybe the
I think we were.
He was talking about a Saturday potentially.
the 8th, or possibly Monday the 10th. I think those were perhaps.
I was gonna
the
jump to the
dates.
10th, but I didn't. I
He was
forgot about-
thinking Saturday the 8th
We were talking
or
about that.
possibly Monday the 10th.
Okay, so could we minimally establish one or both of those?
Is that 8th, is that the bad date for you, Bruce?
No, it's good. In
It-
fact, as I said, that whole thing that I was afraid I might be involved in is just not taking place, so.
I have no issue with the meeting on the 8th. However, my situation's different than some, so if there are members that would prefer not to do it on the weekend, I certainly understand, and we can schedule it for Monday.
I think Monday the 10th honestly would give us as a staff time to, you know, if anything, applicants come in late or right, you know, at the deadline, we can make sure we get stuff put together and start to get information.
The deadline's the 2nd, isn't it?
It's the 4th.
Is it 4th? Is that
I
what it
believe
is?
I believe it is the 2nd.
I thought it was posted.
I thought it was the 2nd, but
It
it
was-
doesn't matter.
I
The,
can look.
the only thing, I think I prefer a Saturday, only because it just makes for a long day and night if it's like a 2 to 3 hour meeting.
And I'm sure it would be.
I mean, I can do
That's
either,
fine.
but.
No, don't apologize for
I would
having a
prefer
family
Saturday
schedule.
just for that almost same reason. I just think it's easier to kind of like, okay, if we stretch a little bit, okay. But
So,
I'm like you,
The
Craig.
8th,
Yeah.
Well, let's hear from at least,
Arlen and Christine?
yeah.
I'm just checking one thing. Do you want to go ahead?
and if
Mine's all weather related,
Yeah.
and so if it's snowing, it's gonna be very hard for me to not be available.
Yeah, I mean, that time of year, it's pretty much any day. That holds true. What do you think?
In that case, should you leave it open, that you could have that's not probably.
No, you can't really.
No.
Yeah, I believe we were-
Christine, what do you think?
The 8th is fine with me.
All
I
right,
just needed to check
let's
my
tentatively
calendar.
schedule it for the 8th.
is there a particular time that would be
I would-
available, starting
I would
maybe-
probably rather start in the morning, I mean,
Same.
9 a.m.
9
perhaps?
o'clock.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. There'll be an action item later.
And just to make my 1 millionth push for the rubric, if we have it and we're using it, it should help us vet the candidates very
Yeah.
clearly and more quickly than if we're randomly talking about
I
them.
think so.
And Dr. Anderson provided us with one, so let's see how that goes, especially for those of us who are new to this. Well, I shouldn't speak, I'll speak for myself. I'm excited because I'm new to the process.
That would probably cover item 9B.
Yes, and I would ask Dr.
Angie?
Anderson if he was here.
Meeting here?
Oh, sorry.
I would anticipate, yes, we would schedule in the school board room,
Okay.
9 a.m. on
I'm
January 8th.
sorry, Christine.
No, it's okay.
Assuming that the action item goes through, that, we got
Sure.
time.
Just curious if I know a number of the board members put forward a number of names, probably have not been contacted yet, and which is fine about the committees because we're still kind of almost not quite a month out to looking at them, but is that true?
Right, so, Dr. Anderson was gone last week.
Yeah.
And he's, so that process, I
Yeah.
think, names. He told me that at least a couple people had
Mhm.
submitted lots
Yep.
of names. And so that's very helpful. And
Yep, you still have
I
time for
can't
that.
speak for Dr. Anderson at the
Yep.
moment. He's,
I did
Yeah.
talk to him about this actually this afternoon, and he just said, yeah, that will be something we'll have to decide. That, I know, Kate, when we were talking after the last board meeting, he suggested he thought an interesting person, and that really got me thinking. So what he's hoping is that there'll be a certain overlap of certain
Mhm.
individuals.
Yeah.
And he's looking at about 15 people, he thinks, something like
That's
that.
fine. I suspect there will be some overlap.
Yeah,
But,
I think
you know, this board is kind of unique in that there's, you know,
Good.
folks that have been here forever and folks that are newer to the community, and the people they may see as good potential committee members are maybe different than those of us that have been here forever and ever. So it'll be interesting. Okay?
9B, I'm able to move on, was a
Yes.
conversation about substitute staffing shortage. And what I want to share again is we would never want to say that we're never overstaffed. Our buildings have been doing an amazing job being creative when they haven't had people available. But, you know, we've been fortunate with our dedicated subbing. As many of you might not know, we also, one of our weakest areas was support staff with regards to special education. We bumped up their rates, and I hate to say it to my counterparts, we stole people from other districts that are near us to make sure our coverage was better. And lately, well, not lately, our teaching and learning department and myself and our building principals have been reviewing who our student teachers have been this fall that are graduating mid-year. And we're reaching out to try to make second semester commitments to graduates that have been here, and also working with UW-Whitewater, Edgewood, and Madison to do something unique, which is go after or future teachers that might be interested in us in the future for open jobs, but also are regional. So as we can do, the best thing we're doing is we're continuing to be unique and go after staff, or future staff, internal staff having to move around, do things. You know, like Darian Riggins will be in classrooms at times. Our reading specialists, our interventionists.
Is it a bit
That
better?
doesn't mean that's great, but at least we do have some staff that can commit some other time, so.
And it's good, the situation's improving some, isn't it, over the last few weeks?
Well, once the weather got not as nice.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people that do subbing, want to have flexibility, and when the weather's gorgeous,
Yeah.
and particularly Mondays and Fridays,
Sure.
they don't. And we'll also see
Understandable.
that as weather gets bad. So there are subs that don't want to travel on
Yeah.
bad weather days. It's very cyclical, and it's, you know, we used to have sometimes 28, 30 openings for positions, and we used to fill those all the time. Those are years gone by, and now we're constantly filling about 18 positions a day, and we have open positions that are already open to help, at what we call an open sub. They don't have someone that's designated to them. But, you know, we're a people business, and we have situations that happen in people's lives. People's COVID takes people away from our sub pool, and it takes people away that are on staff. And as life goes on, every day, you're bound to have a few people out for strange reasons, due to their own lives.
Yep. Well, kudos, you know, to those staff that are willing, you know, to jump in and fill in, you know, many times I think at the expense of their, the time that they would normally use to prepare lessons and do things like that. So, you know, it's not an ideal situation, but I think it's probably a situation shared with virtually every other district in the area. So I think that's pretty good news. You know,
And
that
our
we're-
building administrative assistants are amazing. They are pounding the pavement on Sundays when they see shortages on Mondays. Again, we're having them log their time because they're working. They're in early, they're checking the logs. All the administrators, myself, Carrie, get early morning updates of where we're at as far as early as 6:30 in the morning. So, during the winter, we check the roads and check to see we have subs as well, so.
Sure.
I know this was one of the topics that were brought up by the teachers at our listening session. And I know, again, firsthand as a teacher, the subbing and taking, I remember many times giving up my prep, and it's hard to do, because that just means that night you're gonna be up until 11 o'clock, and you still, teaching, you always have to be prepared the next day, otherwise you're just gonna get eaten up.
And our teachers aren't gonna say no to their colleagues
No,
when they
in
come
fact,
and
that's
ask
why
them to help
when you
out.
mention that, I don't ever remember anyone saying, no, I refuse to do
Exactly.
that. I don't know if you could, but anyway, we just did it. But one of the things that came up was the idea, is it possible, and I think I guess I'd liken this to you guys. If any of you are going for a walk on a really nice day and you're feeling good, you ever got a little stone in your foot, in your shoe? And how, as a runner, if you got a tiny little blister, how that thing would just absolutely disrupt what you were doing. And this is one of these little stones that you could take out of a teacher's shoe. That's the way I look at it. And it was the idea about Zooming, particularly if it turns out, let's say you're sick, but you're well enough that you can actually, or your kids are sick and you're trying to take care of them. And this was something that was brought up by one of the teachers at the listening session. And I will preface this, this happened to my own son, but it's something that I wrote down some ideas. If you allowed teachers when they are home, and I would never make it a blanket thing, I would leave it up to the individual administrators to decide if they want to do that, but number one, it's best for the kids, because you actually have the teacher right there on Zoom, teaching the kids that he knows exactly, or she knows exactly where they're at and what they're trying to do. That allows the person who's come in to actually basically sit back and watch this individual carry on their classroom. So they can be sitting there grading papers or basically taking care of some of their work while the class is actually going on. I put down the idea in education, probably the most important thing is to differentiate. If you have kids who need special needs or whatever, you handle them differently. And it seems to me, I get worried when we sit there, we have a blanket statement, we can never allow this. I would just leave it up to the individual principal to say, yeah, let's allow the teacher to be able to do that. I've heard that some people would be concerned that teachers might take advantage of it and start just doing Zoom all the time instead of being in class. But I think you've got a good check on that. And I think that's the parents. I think the parents would be pretty, suspicious after 4 days in a row. Why is this teacher doing that? Or after 2 days in a row. I think they'd be questioning that. I know it's killing staff having to do that. It's exhausting for them. It's an incentive for sick teachers to stay home when they should stay home. I know personally myself, I would come in sometimes at 6 in the morning to prepare my sub so that my kids had adequate lessons. Then I'd go home and just the rest of the day I'd just crash. And I'm thinking like it would probably be easier for me to be able to just Zoom while I'm not feeling well than to go in at 6 in the morning. I also thought down that at this time particularly, again, I go back to Act 10, but the idea that this would be kind of a nice goodwill gesture to the teachers to say, look, this is a small thing we do. As I said, it's like taking stone out of someone's shoe if you've been walking for a while. It would make them feel, I think, a lot better. And then I think it would also be easier for a teacher to probably do a Zoom lesson. It would take them less time than it would to set up a lesson plan for a sub. Because you have to go to extraordinary details for your sub.
I bet.
Yeah, and you have to lay out books that they're going to be using or run off worksheets or whatever. You have to do all this stuff. And I'm just going like, it would probably be easier just to say, look, if you can do that, fine. I would not make a requirement, but I would say, why don't we be flexible as I differentiate and let the teachers decide for themselves?
Case by
Or the
case.
principal. Yeah, talk it over with the principal. Say, I'm just not feeling well, or my kids are going to be sick, and would you mind if I just, did my Zoom lessons? So I just think it's something we should consider. So,
Go ahead, Christine.
Bruce, are you thinking that, there would be a sub in the room, or?
I think there has to be.
Yeah, okay. So there would be somebody there.
There has to be.
Physically do whatever.
Right.
Not the teaching part necessarily.
Right.
Okay.
And there's certain classes where, you know, I know like what my son teaches, if you're teaching Spanish 3, you may not be able to get someone who's qualified
Right.
to teach it, or
Yep.
a math or a science class. And as far as that goes, even, you know, I think there's so many, tech ed, same thing. I don't know if you can Zoom some of those, and some of those, it's just not applicable, but it seems to me there might be times, and again, I think it's one of these things that would be just kind of like, I can't tell you my feeling. When I had my hip replaced, I came in, I had my hip redone on the 18th, so it was right before school went off, or I missed one day, or I may have been right after school was, you know, on going into the winter break. And I came back that first, whatever it was, January 2nd or 3rd. My leg was swollen. It looked like it was just a sausage. But I was so determined. I wanted to be with my kids. I did not want to just turn this over. And I figured I'd lose 4 or 5 days of
And I don't think
learning
you're
with
the
those kids.
exception
And I
to the
think
rule.
that's how teachers feel.
I do too.
Yeah.
I don't think that's an exception.
No, I don't think it is either. I don't think I did anything exceptional. I think that's how most teachers look at it. And to me, it just seems kind of crazy. If there are those opportunities to do that, do it.
Let's see if we can figure out
Yeah, I mean, I don't know
way
if we need to do that.
a way to
tonight.
have a discussion about that.
Yeah,
Okay?
yeah.
9E would be presentation by McFarland High School Student Council and Principal Mr. Finstad. Process to select student representatives to the Board of Education.
All right, Mr.
Thank you for waiting
Finstad.
for us.
Good evening. We have some students waiting patiently to speak to you tonight.
Oh, sorry.
Let me introduce Chloe Gaxon and Katie Rossman if you want to turn their cameras on.
Oh, my
I think they're here. They can turn their mics on.
I don't think my camera's working, but it says I have it on.
Okay. Is Katie here?
Yes, she is. Hi, sorry.
Okay, I'm gonna really just turn quickly over to them and let them tell you really how they got to be selected from student council to do this, their plan to get voices from the student body, and their plan to bring some other students along with them in future board meetings. So Chloe or Katie, go ahead.
Welcome, ladies.
Hello, thank you guys for having us. So I am vice president of the senior class, and Katie is the secretary. We've been in student council all 4 years during high school. So from our understanding, like the current guidelines that we have, I guess, for student voice that comes to these board meetings are from student council. But the idea that we have is potentially having members from other clubs at our school, like for example, the BSU, which is our Black Student Union, GSA, or Multicultural Club, are just a few examples of clubs. And they would join our school board meetings. We'd have a member or two from each of those clubs, and they'd rotate who goes to each one. And by doing that, it would better represent the entire student body at MHS.
Yeah, our student council alone, we don't have quite a strong voice from the entire student body because as a club, we're mainly in charge of just planning, school events and school dances, and bigger issues and stuff occurring at school aren't normally discussed during meetings. So that's why we want to have a little bit more diversity from other clubs as well.
All right, and then sort of a final idea, last year, a student at the high school introduced a new club called Connect. And basically the purpose of Connect is to connect admin and students and helping them create a stronger form of communication between the two. And so an idea we have is wanting to grow a stronger connection to the school board through Connect, which would add more of a student voice and more representation from our students as a whole.
I'm sorry, I might have missed this, but are both of you seniors?
Yeah, correct. We're both seniors.
Okay.
The other thing I'm going to add to this is I've also approached student council to be, kind of replace our student advisory group. So there'll be some voices I'll go to as well. Admin is also going to Black Student Union once a month, and we will keep moving, going to other clubs to get input from them as well. So overall, we've maintained that tradition of 2 student council reps coming to the meetings and updating you on what's happening in the school. We will be bringing other members with them to kind of give you a more diverse look and hear voices of students you typically don't hear from, and they can share what they're doing. They're going to work with that connect group to be kind of a rotation of connecting with administration, both school board and with high school administration. And student council will become a voice with direct communication with high school administration as well. So that's in essence. Chloe or Katie, have I missed anything?
Nope, that sums it up.
Well, that's great news. Do we know when you might officially attend your first board meeting?
When is the next one? I guess after break.
January
We know the date.
17th.
17th.
We could have students there if you guys were interested in that. I definitely.
Absolutely.
Yes.
That would be fantastic if you could do that.
Yeah.
I think the one request we will have, if we can make sure that on the agenda, this group gets put after the public comment like we have traditionally.
Absolutely, no problem.
Now, there is no school on that January 17th. So actually, do you want to look at the first meeting in February? Or would you like to send a group on a day of no school?
Would it still be at this time on that 17th?
We would anticipate around a 7 o'clock start.
And we would move you up to the beginning of the agenda for the meetings.
Perfect. I don't think there'd be any issues with that. I think we can.
Yeah, I think we would still be able to find some students that are interested in talking.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very
Oh,
much.
Can I
Miss
ask a question?
Christine?
I love your idea. I love the idea that the different groups will be presenting. I also appreciate what you're saying, Mr. Fenstead, about like that you as an admin in high school are also seeking to get input. So it sounds like for that agenda item, we might want to make sure that it's broad, like something like student voice or something. So it's not necessarily what we're hearing only from students, if that's going to be part of it as well. The second thing is, I think it'd be, besides sharing what's going on in students' life, which was really very helpful for me when we were going through COVID and different changes, just that experience and perspective was really helpful. It'd be really great for these different groups to tell us a little bit about what they do as part of their, just a short, informal presentation about what their group is, just so we know about that as well. So I hope I'm not making your task bigger. It's making sure that it's inclusive and like you're doing, really making sure that a variety of student voices and that it is on the agenda. So I kudos to all of you for your thoughts.
Yeah, the plan will be to have the clubs share what they do. I thought we said that, but that's what we'll do.
Sounds great. Any other questions from the board?
No, I think it sounds like it's a wonderful idea, and sorry, both of you ladies, that you had to stay involved as long as you did, because I saw that you were
No
here
worries
before
at
this
all.
meeting started, but thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your time tonight.
Thanks, Chloe. Thanks, Katie.
Thank you very much, all, and again, our apologies for making you stay up so late.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Guess we are to action items, with 10A being discussion and possible action on COVID-19 protocols. And I believe the direction that we're looking to discuss at a minimum is the previous decision to not quarantine both vaccinated and unvaccinated close contacts within the district.
Well, I'll make a motion so we can discuss.
Yep, that would be fine.
Let's see, I haven't thought much, or I wrote a couple notes out. I'd like to make a motion to follow the original quarantine protocol, in which we identified close contacts and those who were unvaccinated moved in a different way, moving towards quarantine, and include a test-to-stay strategy for the unvaccinated students as well.
Okay,
So you can take those up, kind of two separate things and combine them, or?
Well, that was my motion. We can
Okay.
discuss and then go from there.
do I have a second?
I will second that, because I tend to agree with
Okay.
both of them.
Discussion. Christine, would you like to start? I'd just like to hear from the board.
Well, first of all, I do want to make it clear, since this is an agenda item, we never saw the letter that
Right.
came from.
Oh, correct.
PD, or PHDMC.
Correct.
We never saw that letter. We got a lot
I did not.
of letter, the first time I saw it was when someone alerted me to the
Cap time.
That we
Cap
hadn't
Times
seen.
article. So I just
Yes.
want to make that clear. Also, I can only speak for myself, so.
Thank you.
No, that was for all of us.
Well, yeah. So, in the letter, which now that I've seen it, I do agree with, is that we can't decide how we're going to determine close contacts and the quarantining process. I'm concerned with the new variant that a small number of whatever it is, 6% or whatever, that does mean that infected people with COVID are in our schools. And if Omicron, I always make sure I'm saying that right, has it's more susceptible to infection. I don't know what the R naught is, if it's close to 2, because the original one was over 1. So that means for every 10 people who are infected, we're up to 20. So the exponential issue with that, I think, needs to be addressed. The test-to-stay strategy, I think that makes sense. I too do not want people who are not positive out of the school for any length of time. I think we need to strike a balance with that. So that's my thinking.
I agree. Lauren, if you might, have we had any discussions with folks regarding implementing that test-to-stay program?
So the test-to-stay program, we're still waiting on DHS to send out their recommendations. So we just got the notification from the CDC about the test-to-stay program, but then followed by, Wisconsin Department of Health Services saying we are going to send out our recommendations in early 2022. So part of that test to stay, right? We don't know how often should kids be tested if you're identified as a close contact. Is it every day? Is it every 2 days? That's what we're waiting on from the Department of Health Services.
So the plan is at some point to implement the test to stay, assuming that the circumstance is something that we can meet.
Yes, so right now, as I think everybody knows, but I heard in public comment tonight, we are doing the testing program. We are partnered with Fitchburg Family Pharmacy, where we can do both PCR tests and rapid tests at school. So we just need parent consent when we know a student has been exposed or is symptomatic, and we can do both tests. So for example, when we quarantined a whole class, we can offer to that group to come in, at day 6 and get a PCR test. We have tested hundreds of students since the beginning of the year.
Okay.
And so we are testing students now. So the test to stay program would fall right in what we are doing, but we would just test more students.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Lauren.
And how often are you doing rapid tests, and how quickly are you getting the results?
Well, the rapid tests are nice because it's a 15-minute turnaround. So we usually, if given a rapid test to a student, the student will wait that 15 minutes. And then before, if it's positive, then go home. If it's negative, then they may stay at school. Unless, right, there's another reason that they may get sent home. Sometimes, right, if the student is symptomatic at school, we still do the rapid test. Even if it's negative, they still may not feel well and go home. Right? We would like kids who are not feeling well to get the rest they need. We have just recently started implementing more rapid tests or doing more rapid tests because DHS has allowed for us to use rapid tests to rule out. So it used to be with rapid tests, if you got a negative, you would also need a negative PCR test. That is no longer the case. So that is unique if they are symptomatic. So we have been doing more rapid tests, I would say, in the last 3 weeks or so.
Yeah, I just anecdotal evidence, a member of my family, we just did a rapid test yesterday, and it's even less than 15 minutes. Very, very simple. Anyone else have any questions for Lauren while she's available to us here?
Have you seen a lot of, so since we made the change where close contacts who are unvaccinated may be at school, as long as they're asymptomatic, have you seen more spread, I guess, more definitive school transmission?
This question is hard, right? Like, this is a question I get asked, and when I communicate with the principals, when we see positive cases, and then kids that we have identified as a close contact may be testing positive later, we go back and we talk about, is this due to school exposure? But as you know, our kids who are in class together often are kids who play together outside of school. So it's really hard to say 100% this is in-school transmission when, right, our kids don't live kind of in a bubble. If I go to school and I go home and that's it. So it's hard to say. I don't have a great answer. In our case, like with Wabisa, Corey and I had talked greatly about the 5th grade classroom that we moved to virtual. And even in that case, we weren't sure. We had heard from some parents, kids play together on the weekend or after school, or they carpool together. So it's really hard to pinpoint if it's school or different.
So, Lauren, can we play out the hypothetical with that class? So if it was moved to virtual because a number of kids were positive for COVID, correct?
Yeah.
All right.
That case was very, I will say, Christine, a little bit unusual. So we saw with some of our close contacts of the positive case that there were siblings in other schools that later tested positive, and so we just weren't sure. When you connect multiple buildings and think, is this due to school? Is it due to outside of school? We just didn't know, and we wanted to err on the side of caution.
Right.
And actually, since we moved that class to virtual, I believe, and Corey, you can jump in if I'm wrong, none of the kids since we moved to virtual have tested positive. So we didn't see further positive cases with that classroom. And good. I'm right on that. Thank you, Corey.
Thanks, Corey.
So if we were, okay, I understand that's a unique situation, but if we play out the scenario, even with that class, what I'm trying to get at, I think, is what I've been reading and with the public comments and so on, is that some of those kids were vaccinated, right?
So with that, 5th grade is a strange grade, right? Like, because of the age. If they were vaccinated at our clinic, they only hit their 2 weeks this Sunday.
Okay.
So wouldn't have been fully vaccinated.
Right. But if we move forward with this, what would have happened with that class would have been those who were vaccinated would have remained in school because they could. Those who weren't could potentially move to testing in a couple of days. I don't know, like it could be 1, 3, 5, 7. It's not going to be the 6 days. It's going to be sooner than the 6 days. So in essence, what we're trying to do is keep more kids in school by doing this and catching quicker and more accurately the ones who are positive. Because as you're saying, a bunch of kids were out, none turned out positive. And we can't determine where kids are getting COVID, if it's in school or out school. But we do know from the data we have from us as just a case study that 6% of the quarantine turned out to be positive. So for every non-quarantine person or, group, 100, 6 will be walking around the schools and in fact perhaps spreading. So this is just this tension and balance of figuring out, and you're shaking your head, like you're like, yeah, this is all I think about. I know that, right? But I'm just trying to play out what a real case would look like.
And I think, right, it's hard to say because some of our kids are symptomatic, some are not. And so we may not know some kids who test
Right.
positive or would test positive if they were tested.
Right.
So there are a lot of hypotheticals, right, that we played out that we can't know. And I think especially with this new variant, we don't know how that's going to look in our schools.
Right.
And then you have asymptomatic positives too.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Well,
Right.
and some of them could be vaccinated, so they're not gonna be tested, right? Because the test to stay is unvaccinated kids, or am I misunderstanding that?
No, right.
Yeah, they're just
Yeah.
testing
So you are right.
unvaccinated
Right.
kids.
You are right.
So
Right.
when you look at her, like what Lauren sent out before the school board meeting with vaccination rates, when we're talking about this,
Mm-hmm.
like 5th grade, for example, right now, and she says that'll change as people get their second vaccination, but I mean, it's 58% of the class is vaccinated,
Yeah.
the grade. I mean, in the high school, it's above 80 for the most part,
Yeah.
which is really pretty impressive.
So hopefully over the break, people will be able to finish up and get beyond the weeks of not,
Yeah, so I feel like the group we're discussing right now is gonna become a much smaller group of individuals.
Exactly.
And I do think your proposal that we're looking at is a way to encourage people. It does definitely encourage people. Will that make a difference? I don't know.
We'll see.
But I think we want to reward good behavior. There's so much about this virus that we don't know.
Uh-huh.
The one thing that, the specialists are telling us is the one thing that seems to work the best is being vaccinated
Yeah.
fully. And
Well,
so,
and my understanding is that the mask requirement has been extended out to
February now.
Right.
February 1st or February
Right.
3rd or something like that. Yeah, and, given that there's a universal mask requirement, that's got to lessen to some degree the positives that you're going to get with the in-school transmission, isn't it?
That's what Dr. Merwin was saying the last time he was here, as
Yeah.
long as we're all fully masked.
So what we're actually the only real change that we're looking to make at this point is that we are going to quarantine in some form or fashion unvaccinated close contacts and positive tests.
Well, first of all,
You just don't need to quarantine from school.
Okay,
gotcha.
okay. Bruce?
Nothing. I think I said what I wanted to say, other than this is a perfect time, and we have, 2 more days of school?
Yep.
So it's good to have a break here anyway, and I think people who have been vaccinated, the younger ones in particular, hopefully they will, at that point, have developed enough immunization.
I think this whole test to stay thing, I don't think it's a bad idea, but I also don't want to make a decision based on that if it's not something that we're going to be able to implement quickly.
Well, Lauren, what do you think about that for coming back after break?
I will be curious to know what DHS's requirements are going to be with test to stay and what their recommendations are, to know, are we talking just rapid tests and how often, and we'll have to work with the pharmacy to get more rapid tests. I think we were given about 25 per school. So depending on what that could look like, it may need to increase how many rapid tests we're getting from the pharmacy.
But Lauren, you said we're already basically following that process already.
Well, we do test students,
Yeah.
but the piece that I don't know, right, that quarantine period is 14 days.
Yeah.
So will we be required to test a student who's a close contact every 2 days, every day? Because then we're talking 14 tests as opposed to one for one student. So that's the question I just don't know the answer to until DHS sends us their guidance.
So could we make the motion, per guidance from DHS in the recommendation, or the recommended test to stay protocol?
I think the question, Christine, I would have is, right, Dr. Anderson's recommendation was to go back really to following public health's recommendations, right? So we continue to identify the close contacts, and then unvaccinated individuals would need to stay home from school in quarantine.
Yep.
So it may change, right? Like that's a piece, depending on what the test to stay program really says, that part could change. It would just be hard to make that decision today, I think.
Sure.
Just not knowing what it would look like.
Okay.
So we may
Let's reevaluate the motion then a little bit.
Yeah.
Would you read yours again? To the best of your remembrance.
Would you like me to read the motion that
I would love you to read the motion. Thank you, Angie.
So I have here a motion by Privenow, second by Fisher, to follow the original quarantine protocols established by the CDC for unvaccinated individuals and to include a test to stay strategy. That's what I had heard.
Thank you.
Yep, that sounds right. Do we need to,
I think you have to defeat
do we
it.
need, I think we need to
You can make a
defeat
friendly amendment.
this and make a second motion, maybe without the last bit on the test to stay.
Or Christine, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that you could make a friendly amendment to your own motion.
And I'd have to second
And
that.
then you would have to second
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
if that was something that was
Yeah.
comfortable.
Okay. Well, I would like to make a friendly amendment then to return back to the original quarantine protocols. And I guess I'll leave it at that.
Yep,
And I will second that.
okay. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor,
No.
please.
Wait,
You're going too fast. I just don't, the part I'm not disagreeing, the part I don't like is just making regardless of vaccination, if they're masked, having them stay home. And I'm just wondering, before we get the whole state of test thing down, could we just say, set our own criteria until DHS gives theirs? You know what I mean? Where
Yeah.
we say they need to get 2 negative rapid tests, let's say on day.
you can make that next motion then.
I don't, Lauren, is that bad?
No, I think we just need to be, right, this DHS's information could come out the first week of January. And so if it's different than what the board has decided, we would follow what the board decides rather than what DHS may suggest.
Right.
But then what if DHS doesn't release anything till February, which is always a possibility?
That could
Right.
happen as well.
We also have to be cognizant of supply chain.
That's, yeah.
Yes. That's a very good point.
I have a question, I guess. I'm wondering, Kate, if in your line of work you saw a significant uptick in post-Thanksgiving holiday positives or close contacts, that sort of thing, or is it still too early to really know if?
I mean, we're seeing an uptick, definitely, whether it's,
But
it was occurring kind of right around Thanksgiving. It's hard to say.
Yeah,
I mean, the hard part about this virus is that you've got, the majority of the children that I see aren't really that sick. And that's the hard part, is that they might have a dry cough and a scratchy throat. And then you test them and they have COVID, and that's what's making this virus so difficult, I think, in general, is that some people are very sick and others are not. And so there's no real great way to identify. Prior to this pandemic, most of these kids not most, but, you know, the dry cough, scratchy throat kids would be in school. I mean, they weren't really warranted as sick enough not to be, and I think that's the hard part about all of this.
Right.
I don't disagree, I just really, you know, I think I hate going forward and going back, and I know that that's part of this pandemic, but I also know taking kids out of school for 10 days, multiple times, is tough, you know, and some of it is because parents don't believe in the vaccine, and everybody has their own reasons for that, but these kids aren't going to get vaccinated, and that's, I
Did you
don't
say
want.
are or aren't?
Aren't,
Aren't,
because there's certain parents, right, that just feel very strongly about not vaccinating their children for one reason or another. And I don't want the children to suffer because of
Right.
parent choice. And that's where I struggle with this, and trying to get them to stay in school if they're healthy, you know.
Mhm.
Yep.
So
And that-
that's where I'm at with it.
Yeah, and I think that's why the test to stay is
Yeah.
but I mean, technically, we could do a second motion, which I think is, we're separating them, because we
Right.
can't,
I
we don't
wonder if
know
we
what.
could do can you do a motion that would stand until DHS releases guidelines, or do we?
Well, that could be the motion that is on the table now, couldn't it?
No.
No.
It's separate now,
So
so,
I would say, you know, like there's this new motion, right, to test based on supply, until DHS releases guidelines, and then we would revert back to DHS guidelines.
Mhm.
I don't,
I would support that.
So the motion on the table now,
I'm
No,
making this so
we're still,
complicated.
no, my
No.
motion's still on the table, it needs to be voted on, we were
Right,
just
right, right,
discussing.
right.
But that's,
But that could be the second one, Kate, if you wanted.
But you made that friendly amendment,
Right,
which is now on the table, and that does not include the testing.
correct,
That's just the quarantining unvaccinated kids.
correct.
And right now, you feel like you've got, what, 25, you said 25 rapid tests or so
Per school.
per school?
Yeah, so when I look at CDC right now, their recommendation is testing at least twice in a 7-day period. So DHS could say, right, 2 or 3 times in that 7-day period. You know, at any given point, we may have 10 to 15 close contacts for one positive case. So we will just have to ensure that we reach out to the pharmacy and ask for more rapid tests, because what we have now may be used up in one positive case if there are 20 close contacts. And maybe it will be less because our kindergarten through 6th graders can be vaccinated. So those close contacts, let's say out of the 20, 10 are not vaccinated. Those are the kids that we will be testing.
Okay, I mean, I would like to try to do that, so maybe we make 2 different motions then. Okay, so do you make the first and then?
Yep, mine's done,
already
it's already, we're
Yours is
on
there.
You
second motion, we
amended it
just need.
already?
For
Yep,
friendly
we just need
amendment.
to
Okay.
vote, right. So just to be clear, so everyone's, Go ahead.
Can we create 2 motions on one action item? I don't know, this one I'm not sure on.
yeah, I think this is gonna be
I would think you'd have to
I
do
think
each
it's
separate.
this will be a second action item.
Yeah.
You have a motion and a second with the revised friendly amendment.
Yep.
Mhm.
You can vote on that,
And then I'll make a new motion.
and
Right.
then make another motion.
Yeah.
I think so.
So Angie, could you read that again?
Okay,
Here we go.
give me a second. All right, so I have motion by Pribenow, second by Fisher, to follow the original quarantine protocols established by the CDC for unvaccinated individuals, period. Because we removed
Yep,
and to include a test to stay
Yep.
strategy.
that's fine. Everybody understand at this point? Any other discussion?
I'd like-
Hearing none?
Wait, Craig, I want to hear it one more time. I want to make sure we got this thing right.
Okay,
Say it again, Angie.
Okay, motion by Pribenow,
Yeah,
second by
second by
Fisher, to follow the original quarantine protocols established by the CDC for unvaccinated individuals.
The only thing I'm in trouble with that, here I
That's okay.
second it, is, was that the original CDC recommendation? The original recommendation, we changed it.
Right.
And now we're,
We're going back.
is it
So-
going back to what it was?
But the way we changed it was to not quarantine unvaccinated.
Right.
Close contacts.
So
Close
does that
contacts.
fit? with the what-
Well, I mean, it's actually technically PHMDC, Wisconsin Department of Health Services, and CDC.
Okay,
That they're all aligned in that quarantine
okay.
protocol. so.
Right. So the change we made shouldn't affect this. I think this is the proper motion that we have now.
Unless Lauren would need more guidance, no, then I think it is.
Don't think so?
If she yeah.
You good, Bruce?
I'm good.
All right.
I just want to
You
make
good?
sure we're doing the right thing here.
All right.
Yeah, I
All
do
those
too.
in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Before we move on,
Okay, so now I'll make a motion that we will start a test to stay program pending DHS recommendations, which will override our recommendations, to test any close contacts who are unvaccinated at day 3 and 7.
Or how about just twice in 7 days?
Twice in
Okay,
7
twice
days.
in 7 days.
Yeah.
I don't think we should test before day 3, though.
I will defer to you on that.
You
Yeah,
guys can work
I
on
think
that.
we should test at day 3 and beyond, twice in 7 days. Okay.
Are you amenable to that, Lauren?
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Okay.
Christine?
I'll second.
Are you done with your motion?
I guess, yeah. Does that even make sense? You might want to read it.
Yeah, read it back.
Well, I do not, I'm sorry, I don't
Yeah.
have enough here yet to read it back.
Yeah.
Oh,
So-
okay. That's fine.
So, to
So-
implement a test to stay program pending, excuse me,
DHS.
pending DPI recommendations.
DHS. That's all right.
Yeah,
DHS recommendations to test any close contacts at day 3 and beyond based on supply.
Unvaccinated.
Unvaccinated.
Mhm.
Are all here.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think it was at day 3 and another time within
Another
7
time.
days, right?
Mhm.
within.
So at day 3
7.
and beyond,
And day 3, oh wait,
Okay, so test twice at day 3 and beyond.
okay.
In the
based on supply.
first 7 days after exposure.
There. I think that made
As long
it.
as supplies are available.
As long as supply is
That's-
available.
That's scary.
And families.
With-
say we can.
Consent.
Yeah,
Consent.
family's consent.
and if, yeah.
That's
So-
a long
Guardian
motion.
consent.
That's okay, though.
All good.
It's
But
got
they-
everything covered, though.
Yeah.
And they
that's
would
all
have the
right.
choice to not go through you, Lauren, right? They could go to forward on their own, they could go to their doctor and so on.
Well, so you can do rapid tests, they have to be read by a licensed professional, though. You can't rely on, so people can pay. I know there's rapid tests where a licensed professional reads the test. They do it all on Zoom virtually, and I think that, people can do those too, but you just, like buying an at-home rapid
No.
test and saying it was negative, I don't think is.
No, that's not what I meant.
Oh, okay.
I meant like going to your doctor, going through going through a,
Yeah, because you can
Yeah.
get these rapid
Yeah.
tests and do them
Yeah.
yourself. I
Jeff's
know
making
that.
faces about my long
But
motion.
no, the motion's great. I think we're talking about a program that we're looking at what DHS is probably gonna say,
Mhm.
which is a stay to play testing program, of which the district is the partner in that. So I think that's kind of the key here.
What do you got, Angie?
All right, so this
But-
is what I have. Oh,
The great news is, again, we can always meet again
mhm.
Yeah,
for a quick meeting if we
Mhm.
had to revise this.
Yep.
Yep.
Even in early January.
Well, we have said that
We've
we
done
are
those
willing
before.
to do
We've
that
had
all along.
morning meetings, afternoon, so I think you're on the right track of getting us so that we're kind of set up for if DHS does come through, and if not, we have something.
Yep.
But we can always revisit as soon as we have to.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so what I have right now, and let me just clarify, Arlen seconded,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Okay. So right now I have a motion by Green, second by Halverson, to implement a test-to-stay program pending DHS recommendations to test any unvaccinated close contacts twice at day and 3 and beyond in the first 7 days after exposure, as long as supply is available and pending guardian consent.
Yeah.
I like it. Erlen, you satisfied?
Yeah.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries 5-0.
Okay,
All right.
thanks.
Thank you very much, folks.
And
Job
Angie,
well done.
Thanks.
Okay.
Longest motion in history, I know.
No, not nearly the longest motion in history. We'll move on. Discussion and possible action on capital plan items. And I believe specifically we're talking about the baseball, softball, and playground
Yeah.
potential.
Approval.
Oh, yeah. Oh, go. Did you-
Okay.
you want- I can make the
I got Arlen the motion,
I'll second.
second Christine. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Next is discussion and possible action on 2021-2022 budget adjustments. And that was $307,000 moving from 21-22 to 22-23.
Correct.
Okay.
I'll move it.
I'll
Okay,
second.
Christine, Kate. Any other discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Action on approval of annual meeting date. Administration recommends that the school board set an annual meeting date for October 24th, 2022. Do I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
All right. Bruce, second.
I'll second.
Kate, discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Okay, action on MHS early graduation requests. MHS administration recommends approval of the attached MHS early graduation request.
I'll make the motion.
Christine, do you have a second?
I'll second.
Kate, discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Action to set a special Board of Education meeting date and time to review and finalize list of individuals to be interviewed for superintendent position. And I believe we settled on January 8th at 9 a.m. in the district boardroom. I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Arlen, discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. And action on recommended WEVA, Destination Career Academy and Insight School, Wisconsin, State Statute 118.408G, student transfers to resident districts. At this time, WEVA, Destination Careers Academy and Insight School of Wisconsin are requesting approval of recommended student transfers back to their resident districts due to lack of engagement.
I'll make the motion.
Christine, do I have a second?
I can second.
Kate, discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0, and I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move adjourn.
Arlen,
I'll
got a
second.
second?
I'll second it.
Bruce. Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0, and we are adjourned at 9:23.
Thanks for giving me that little bit of grace in that. I was like, I don't